South Korea is currently confronted with a significant diplomatic conundrum. Should this country back Ukraine by supplying military equipment to a country that is still being ravaged by conflict as a direct result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February? To prevent a domestic security hole from being created, Seoul has thus far chosen to withhold cooperation. But would South Korea's recent address to parliamentarians by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky cause them to rethink their minds? Hey intellectuals, welcome to Darkness Unraveled. In today's video, we are going to talk about whether South Korea provides Ukraine with weaponry to aid it in its fight against Russia. So stay with us till the end of this video so you don't miss out on any of this information. But before we proceed, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click on the bell symbol so that you don't miss out on any of our wonderful videos in the future. And let's get started. Human rights and democracy concerns have arisen in light of Korea's recent arms contract with Poland, including 980 K2 tanks, 670 K9 self-propelled howitzers, and 48 Fa-50 light combat aircraft. Poland stated on July 27 that it had signed a framework deal to purchase these weapons from South Korea. The overall export amount will be determined by the conditions of the contract, although it is expected to be anywhere between 10 trillion won and 40 trillion won. This estimate takes into account the cost of providing logistical support for the acquired weapons over the course of the contract's duration. In January of this year, South Korean domestic interceptor missile Chongung-2 was the subject of a $3.5 billion arms export contract between the UAE and Korean aerospace and defense contractor Lignex-1. It was the largest U.S. arms export contract at the time. However, the record it set was surpassed only 6 months later when a contract was signed with Poland. South Korea has signed several other major deals in recent months, including one with Australia in December to supply K9 self-propelled howitzers and another with Egypt in January. February to supply upwards of 2 trillion won's worth of weapons, including the K9 self-propelled howitzer to the North African country. The name K-Defense was created in part due to the meteoric rise of South Korean weaponry exports. Some analysts project that South Korea will leap from being the world's 8th greatest exporter of guns to the 5th largest in the near future. The burgeoning South Korean defense industry. Experts in the defense sector have speculated that the success of South Korea's arms exports can be attributed to the country's timely and reliable deliveries of high-quality products, as well as the competitive prices of its domestic weaponry compared to those of the US and Europe. After the conclusion of the Cold War, military superpowers like Europe no longer needed to mass-produce conventional weaponry like tanks and self-propelled artillery. However, due to the threat posed by North Korea, South Korea has maintained a defense sector with the capability of producing such weapons in huge quantities. So, South Korea has the industrial capacity to mass-produce and rapidly equip Poland with the weaponry it needs to fight the Russian threat. After being written off as a Cold War relic, Korea's military sector is finally coming into its own. But the low price of Korean weaponry isn't the only factor in the industry's meteoric rise. The export of weapons from a country is heavily influenced by both economic and international geopolitical variables. Countries like Poland and Finland, which have bought South Korean K9 self-propelled howitzers, have done so in response to security concerns posed by Russia and China, respectively, such as India and Australia. The massive export deal that Korean defense companies struck with Poland last month was motivated by a growing sense of vulnerability in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Guns are not like cell phones or cars in any way. Products made for bearing arms have a direct correlation to human mortality. Arms exports are also useful for both sides of a fight. Fear and the desire to fight back are what motivate people to use weapons. Conversely, when considering democratic values and human rights, arms exports have been a contentious issue. In 1997, Turkey received the first shipment of K9 self-propelled howitzers from South Korea. When Germany refused to provide armaments to Turkey out of concern for exacerbating conflicts and human rights abuses, Turkey resorted to buying weapons from Korea instead of developing its own self-propelled artillery through licensing equipment from German artillery. In October 2019, Turkey shelled Kurdish fighters in northeastern Syria along its border, an act that was made possible by Turkey's development of its own model for self-propelled artillery thanks to imports of the K9 howitzers. Local Korean civil groups at the time criticized Turkey's invasion of Kurdish-controlled Syrian land and urged the Korean government to halt arms exports to Turkey. However, there was no reaction from the Korean government. In spite of this, several European nations have banned military transfers to Turkey over concerns for Kurdish human rights. These nations include Germany, the Netherlands, and Norway. After signing a framework agreement on July 27 for the sale of FA-50 light combat aircraft, K2 tanks, and K9 howitzers, representatives from the Polish government and South Korean defense firms posed for a photo. President and CEO of Hyundai, Rotem Lee Yong-bae, President and CEO of Korea Aerospace Industries, An Yun-ho, President and CEO of Hanwha Defense, Sun Jae-il, and the President of the Management Board of the Polish Armaments Group, Sebastian Schwalek, are pictured from left to right. The real reason Poland buys arms from South Korea. Poland imported 980 K2 tanks from faraway South Korea for a purpose, despite its proximity to Germany, one of the world's greatest tank manufacturers. The Ukrainian conflict has worsened relations between the Polish government and the European Union, especially Germany. Poland has long been seen negatively by the European Union due to the perception that it routinely breaches human rights and restricts free media. However, Polish criticism of German appeasement of Russia prior to the Ukrainian conflict contributed to tense relations between the two countries. Nevertheless, it's quite doubtful that South Korea will actually cut off weaponry deliveries to Poland. Defense exports are a complicated problem, including human rights and international politics, and should not be regarded through the lens of a simple great gain from an industrial perspective. In January, a report titled 2021 Arms Sales Risk Index was published by the Cato Institute, a private security think tank in the U.S. The research highlights corruption, instability, internal human rights, and conflict as 4 potential bad outcomes that may be caused by arms sales. The higher the score from 1 to 100, the greater the potential danger. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Pakistan, Egypt, Turkey, India, and Mexico all received scores of 40 or above. Exports of Korean armaments are sent to many countries, including Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and India. South Korea's Defense Minister Lee Jong-sup has stated that despite these developments, the country is still mindful of human rights and other universal values while exporting weapons. On Thursday, Lee told reporters that he completely agreed with the argument that universal human values are equally essential to take into account when exporting weapons, even though national interest is more vital. On that same day, Lee was asked if South Korea should change its arms export regulations to place a greater emphasis on human rights, as the Biden administration did. Lee responded that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs undertakes a lot of checks on these matters and makes choices based on conversations amongst ministries linked to foreign affairs and security, when deciding whether or not to export weapons to a particular country. It's likely that South Korean defense firms would use this agreement as a springboard to increase sales to other countries across the world by highlighting the cutting-edge technology used to create the equipment in question. And that's it for today, guys. We sincerely hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please click on the like button and share it with your friends and family. If you have any questions or comments, please share them with us in the comments space below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to see even more of our incredible videos. You can also check out our other videos that have been specially selected for you. We'll catch up in the next video.